What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. Now, today I've got for you a couple of entitled people stories. The first one involves a male Karen going at a homeless man. Now, why, you ask? Because he was making some food for himself. I know, as crazy as that, let's get into the story. Karen tries to stop a homeless man's cookout. Now I'm frustrated. I am homeless and don't have many options food-wise. Like the rest of the world, I have the same options: eat out or cook for myself. Restaurants are way out of my price range. The cheapest thing on the menu at a fast food place is enough to feed myself for an entire day from a cheap grocery store. My options to prepare my food are limited. I don't cook back at my camp. It's too dangerous and attracts too much attention. So I use the fire pits located in many of my city's parks. FYI, they are legitimate fire pits meant for picnics and for the public to use. Today it was going to rain very early, so I went to the pit I use regularly to cook my breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever it is. I only eat once a day, early. I got to the pit around 3:30. I wrapped my foil pouch, made of potatoes, carrots, and lunch meat foil bake. I had the fire going and my food in when this male Karen aggressively walked towards me and the pit with a cell phone to his ear. He came up screaming, "What the frick are you doing? What are you doing? That's a freaking fire. What are you doing?" I said, "I'm cooking dinner." The guy yelled at me to put the fire out, saying it's against the law. Now, this isn't the first time I have dealt with a very similar situation. I told him to eat a D and beat it, and to his credit, he left. Until the fire department showed up. They came to put out my fire. I talked with them and they said the police were on the way as well and that I could be fined $500 for having a fire in a non-designated place. I said, "Isn't this one of the places? Look at the fire pit." Well, they decided to wait until the police came. The cops asked me what's cooking. They said, "Yeah, this is the spot to have a fire," and pointed at the sign saying Picnic Area 3. And I'll give credit where credit is due, they were dang good cops. They left without even asking my name. P.S. My meal came out fantastic. Okay, so there we go for the first story. And look, even if this guy genuinely did think that, you know, you're not allowed to do barbecues or use public fires or whatever, clearly, first of all, he was absolutely wrong in that. But even if he did think that you weren't allowed to do it, just why get involved? It's a homeless guy. Like, do you need to get involved there at all? Could you not just carry on with your day and leave him to it? Even if it is illegal, why do you have to be the one to say, no, you're not allowed to cook your food there, when you can see that the guy is homeless and struggling, obviously, anyway? I just don't think it's worth getting involved. But yeah, this guy clearly is a Karen anyway, or a Darren. What do we end up calling? A Kevin, wasn't it? No, not a Kevin. What do we end up calling male Karens? Were they Darrens? I don't know. Drop in the comments down below. But yeah, whatever. This guy is just clearly getting his nose in where it doesn't belong for no real reason. Even if it was illegal, I just don't think it was worth it. And the fact that it's completely legal and you're allowed to do it, and if anything encouraged, like they're there for public use, makes him look like even more of an idiot than he already was. Also, shout out the police, because a lot of the time police get kind of a bad rep, I think, for dealing with homeless people in a worse way. But this time, you know, you got treated completely fairly and correctly. So that is good to see as well. Although I do kind of feel like the fire department should also have known that this was a designated spot to have a fire, given they are the fire department. But hey, we can't have everything, can we? Now moving on to our second story. This is actually the last story of this episode. It's a long one, so get locked in. It's very, very juicy. My sister got mad at me for regularly eating in a hospital cafeteria and got our parents on her side. The rest of the family laid into them for it. So my sister decided to prank me as revenge by literally having my bike stolen and dumped. I nearly called the cops. I really apologize for the length of this post. First of all, do not apologize. The longer the better, in my opinion. But writing down all the details took way longer than I thought. And this situation was downright crazy. I never thought my sister would do something like this. Not too long ago, I, a 23-year-old man, posted in r/AmIThejerk for advice, because my parents and sister were angry at me for regularly eating in a hospital cafeteria because it's close to my work. Now, I enjoy the peace and quiet there on the days that I do show up to eat, but this situation escalated so radically that I can't believe something so dumb actually happened. My sister did the pettiest thing she's ever done to me. and for completely undeserved reasons too. When my sister found out I was eating at the hospital cafeteria, she went off on me over how that food is just for people who are at the hospital because they need to be. We ended up in a big argument about it, in which I told her it wasn't like I was taking food from the mouths of patients. Then she went to our parents to get them on her side like always, and they immediately sided with her just like I thought they would. They backed her up on how the hospital cafeteria was not a place to go eating casually, and we had a big argument. They spent days hounding me and telling me I was wrong and demanding I stop, so I went to Reddit. And here I learned that not only was I not doing anything wrong, but it's a very common thing for people to go eat at hospital cafeterias just because they like it. Now I have to interject it and say that what your sister is saying here, OP, is possibly one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. You're not taking the food that is given to patients. You're going into the cafeteria where you have to pay for food. It's a place for visitors of patients. It's a place for anyone, it's a public place. The one thing it isn't for is for patients of the hospital because they are getting food in their rooms, in their beds, aren't they? I mean, unless I'm just misunderstanding the situation here, at least in England, where I live, the cafeteria that is, there when you go into a hospital is completely public and it is for anyone and you have to pay for the food. It's very separate to the food that patients get. Anyway, OP continues. I hope the situation would just fade away. But a few days later, my sister called me asking me if I'd stopped eating at the hospital. I said no, and then it all started again. My parents then called me fuming, acting like I was supposed to stop going because they said so. I reminded them that I don't live under their roof anymore. And this is exactly the kind of reason why I moved out. They take my sister's side in almost everything. They huffed and puffed about it. This time the fight didn't stay at home though. Other relatives found out because my sister tried to broaden her supports. She was so dead set on enforcing her will upon me that she went looking for help from other relatives. But our parents were the only ones on her side, and my uncle personally admonished my parents and her over the phone for it once I told him what actually happened. He told them they were only siding with my sister because she's their favourite, and that they're terrible parents for ever playing favourites in the first place. Then my cousin went to eat with me at that hospital cafeteria and said that he'd like to go there once a week too, as he also works nearby and cycles everywhere. We've run into each other at lunch there once already since then. He was actually rather pleased to find out the food was made healthier than most other places. He's a bit of a picky eater. So this place is kind of like his new lunch hangout. And my sister, of course, got even angrier after finding out there were other people in the family eating at the hospital now too. I really hope that this ends up with your entire family, apart from your parents and your sister OP, eating at the hospital as much as possible. Once outed, my parents backed down due to embarrassment. They apologized to me and gave me some malarkey that they honestly thought eating at a hospital was weird and that they felt like they just needed to defend my sister. I told them they'd been placating my sister for so long that it's all they do whenever she starts something with anyone. She's been treating me like a condescending control freak and a bully since we were teenagers, even though I'm older, and they just kept enabling that. But I won't put up with it anymore. My parents ended up conceding and apologized. Then they made my sister apologize to me too, and I could tell she hated every second of it because she tried to speak through her teeth at first. Later on, my parents invited me to dinner as another form of apology, but it felt more like a show to look good to the rest of the family because they told everyone about it before it even happened. The dinner was great, I can't deny. My parents had cooked a turkey, arguably one of my favorite things to eat. I love the drumsticks slathered with gravy. Yeah, I'm kind of a pig when I eat them, but I can't help it. My sister always thought it was hilarious and was one of the few things I didn't mind her laughing about. So I thought nothing of why she was so giggly at dinner. Later, after dinner, I noticed that my bike was missing. I parked it in the backyard out of sight, but it was just gone. I freaked out because it's my only mode of transportation. My parents did panic a bit with me, but my sister seemed just the opposite. She actually looked happy and was still giggling. I immediately suspected her, but she played innocent. She even gave the "I can't believe you think I'd do something like that" line. I already know that she's extremely petty, but this was a whole new level of it for her. So I said that I was going to go over to the neighbour because I know they have cameras and they'd have seen what happened. And then I'd call the cops. My sister, of course, suddenly looked panicked, and I got mad and said I knew it was her, and I demanded my bike back. She started crying, saying she didn't do anything, and then our parents, of course, immediately took her aside, scolding me for daring to accuse her. So I had enough and said I was going to the neighbours to ask to check their cameras, and then I'd be calling the police. My sister finally fessed up and called me to come back. The looks on our parents' faces after they just defended her were priceless. My sister said she was just so angry at me for having made her apologise for something she still believed she was right about. So she planned to have a couple of her friends come and grab my bike during dinner. She said her friends were in a minivan with it just down the street. She then started saying that I couldn't call police on her anyway because I'm her big brother. Our parents backed that up too. But I pulled out my phone and started marching outside again. They ran after me, with my sister begging and crying for me to stop. I called her a brat, and then I told my parents I couldn't believe they were still defending her when she was acting this way. Our parents finally hit their enabling limit with her and told her to make her friends bring my bike back immediately. She got on her phone while sniffling and called her friends up. But then she suddenly ran into her room to talk to them. I couldn't hear a thing she said through the door because it was all whispers, and our parents looked very worried too. My sister would never have willingly admitted that she had my bike stolen. She just kept sobbing that it was only a prank over and over again, and she also kept using the excuse that it's just a cheap bike anyway. I bought it used some months ago for $50, but it's in great shape and it's my main mode of transportation, and this is me saying this now, guys, it doesn't matter how expensive it is, she still stole it from you. My sister kept looking at our parents to back her up, and that time they just couldn't. So she just slumped down in a chair, hugging her knees and waiting with the rest of us. She looked increasingly freaked out the longer her friends took to bring my bike back and was repeatedly texting them. Even though my sister said her friends were just down the street, it took them roughly an hour to bring my bike back. They finally pulled up in the minivan with my bike shoved in the back, and it was completely soaked and all muddy, like it had just been pulled out of a wet, muddy ditch. The bike is a 700C, so it's too tall for either of them to ride. So they just drove right up and stole the bike by dragging it into the van as fast as they could before taking off. I say they stole it because I was almost certain in the moment that my sister had told them to dispose of my bike. Had I not pointed out the neighbours have cameras, I may not have gotten it back. When her friends did finally arrive, their legs were all muddy and wet, nearly up to their knees. They both begged me not to report them to the police for taking the bike. I asked while recording them to tell me the truth, and I pointed out the neighbours have cameras. Did my sister want them to get rid of my bike? They broke down and said yes. My sister wanted them to take the bike, dump it in a pond a few miles away, and then they had to go back and get it when they realised they were caught. My bike had been near completely submerged in muddy water. Thankfully, I didn't have many added accessories on it other than a detachable headlight and my water bottle, but the water bottle was missing. I wasn't surprised by what my sister's friends told me, and I had them tell our parents too. They laid into my sister till she was bawling on the floor, kicking and pounding like a toddler. I'd never seen her act that way since she actually was one, and I found it mortifying that she was still like this on the inside. Then she shut herself in her room. Her friends were banned from ever coming to my parents' house again. Then my sister was forced to come out of her room by our mother and make another big apology to me. Our father then forced her to wash and oil my bike from stem to stern under his supervision while I took apart the headlight and cleaned it out to dry it. By the time my sister was done, it was dark outside. She glared at me like I was the devil when she came back in the house, but our parents shut her attitude right down and said they'd never been more embarrassed by her in their lives. She went back to crying in her room. I had a very frank discussion with my parents about my sister's childlike behaviour and how it stemmed from their spoiling and enabling. I said I couldn't believe that I had to be the voice of reason, but the fact that she was on the floor, crying like a toddler, kicking and pounding, showed that she's still mentally a child because of them. And they kept making me the scapegoat when she screwed up, so she barely knows any sense of accountability. For once, they didn't argue with me about it. And then my father silently drove me and my bike back to my apartment with his SUV. He also gave me some money to replace my bike's missing water bottle before we parted. My sister and her clique used to harass me a fair bit whenever we ran into each other. They made fun of me as a group whenever possible, and I usually just ignored them because they bored me, and that really seemed to tick them off. But after the bike incident, I got sent numerous messages from numbers I didn't know, cussing me out for making my sister cry over a silly prank. Knowing her, she probably fed everyone she knew a very different story of what happened. I texted lengthy replies of what actually happened and even stated that I have recordings of her friends admitting the truth. Some people at my sister's college found out what actually went down. Maybe from my texts, maybe her friends spilled the beans, but it's embarrassed my sister so much that she came home having a crying tantrum about how people there were calling her and her friends bees and bike thieves. I may not have gone to college, but I know students who need them are very protective of their bikes. A lot of them live on shoestring budgets after all. My sister says someone even joked they shouldn't leave a bike around her because it might just disappear if she had to apologize to anyone. My sister ended up so upset that she refused to leave her room for 3 days to have her pity party. My parents called me up to try and turn everything on me again. What? I cannot believe that. Really? After seemingly conceding the fact that they have enabled your sister's terrible behavior, they then revert back to type. I mean, probably I should have expected it, but goodness me. Anyway, OP continues. I reminded them about the discussion we had days before and that they needed to stop babying her and let her deal with the repercussions of her own actions. If she fails her classes again, it's because she's not trying like she should be. Then I went off on them how they were just looking for someone to blame to make her feel better. She made the problem, not me, and I wasn't going to be the one they make the scapegoat anymore. My sister's an adult and she needs to act like it. They sounded defeated and then apologized before ending the call. It looks like they were genuinely hoping I'd just sit back and take the blame so my sister would get better, but I never will again. Now my parents are trying to pretend this all never happened, and my sister as well as her clique are avoiding me at all costs, which I suppose is fine with me because I don't want any more drama. But the next time something like this happens, I won't take it from them. Well, moral of this story is that your sister and parents are just awful people, and thankfully the rest of your family aren't like them. But I genuinely was thinking that perhaps your parents had turned a corner after you're 23, didn't say your sister's age, but after a couple of decades probably of enabling your sister's terribly entitled behavior and just allowing her to just walk all over you. I thought maybe we got to the end. Maybe finally there had been some justice, and they'd realized, oh my goodness, we've just been terrible parents to her our entire lives, or her entire life. But no. Then they came back and said, actually, no, we thought about it, and yeah, you were wrong the whole time. Despite us listening to everything you said that was obviously completely factual and correct. Nah, you're wrong. Sorry. We've actually decided that you've treated your sister badly and we've treated her well. And this is all your fault once again. I will say honestly, OP, that just based on your last sentence, when you said the next time something like this happens, I won't take it from them. Are we not at this level yet? Like, wasn't this probably the last? I mean, it has to have been the last straw. She's got her friends to steal your bike and throw it in a pond for no reason. Surely at that point you just have to say, no, I'm done with this, and I'm not speaking to you again or my parents because you're enabling the behavior. And also, her friends, by the way, are as idiotic as her. They're literally breaking the law. She, to be fair, is not actually the one doing the crime. I know she set it up, and obviously that's still illegal, but they, for whatever reason, I don't know, she must have some sort of hold on them, but they're willing to steal her brother's bike and throw it in a pond. You go to prison for that. They're as idiotic as her. I mean, our whole friend group just seem like idiots. Yeah, terrible people. Your sister and her enabling parents, your enabling parents. Get them gone, is all I can say.